Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here for Lowepost.com, and I'm back again with the next lesson in our Scratch Essentials tutorial series. And in this lesson, I want to start working through the basics of Scratch, and I wanted to start out working inside of the construct window. Now, to do this, I thought what the best way to go forward was to talk about it in the sense of doing an AAF conform. Really, there's going to be two main workflows for you inside of Scratch. One is going to be a dailies workflow, one is going to be a conform workflow. In this lesson, I want to start talking about the construct window by bringing an AAF in from Avid Media Composer, talking about the process of getting it from that file into the actual 4K footage in your timeline. And then what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about metadata. Now, as we go along, I'm going to be showing you some cool features inside of the construct window. And keep in mind that as we go, we're going to be going back and forth between the different windows to really get in and show you how the three windows work together with each other to make the overall workflow inside of Scratch as smooth and as straightforward as possible. Alright, so let's Command or Alt and Tab it to assimilate Scratch, and we are in the construct window. So let's talk about getting that AAF file into our project. Now we're going to be conforming an AAF file that came from Avid Media Composer. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what some of these windows do inside of the construct window, because to be honest, I could be talking about this window probably for about an hour or two. Okay, but what's great about the way that we're going to be working inside of Scratch is that we're going to be constantly coming back to the different windows to do different tasks. Okay, so keep that in mind. We might not cover something in this lesson that we're probably going to come back and talk about in subsequent lessons. So let's head down to the conform section of the construct window, and what we want to do is we want to import our AAF file. You'll see that we are on the desktop right now, and I'm going to select the from media composer .exported.aaf. I'm going to navigate down and say open. Now, I'm going to be honest with you right now. This is probably one of the most in-depth AAF conform breakdowns I've ever seen in any application, whether it's a nonlinear editing application or a finishing application. What I love about this window is that not only does it tell us what footage that we are looking for and where it should be located, but it also gets in and even tells us what effects were used. For example, on this clip, Epic Adventures 09, a spatial adapter was used with a speed change of -100%. Okay, so you can see, now this is a rather short AAF, but obviously depending on your AAF, you'll be able to go through and see exactly what's going on with all the clips and their time codes and their file locations, so that you can make sure that you find all of your footage exactly where you need it to be found. Okay, now for us, we're going to be importing our footage from a folder, and I'm going to do things a little bit differently than I would normally do it. What I'm going to do is, instead of being specific and choosing the exact folder where I know that that footage is located, let's select the main root folder, just the Media 1 hard drive, and we're going to tell Scratch to find all of the media inside of my hard drive. This is a little bit of a different way of working than you might be accustomed to. In a lot of cases, the application is expecting to see all the media in one folder or very specific folders. We're just going to tell Scratch, go and find it. So what I'm going to do is select that root folder, and now we have to choose what do we want Scratch to associate these clips with. Do we want it to match time code? Do we want it to match the reel? Do we want it to match the name? Or do we want it to match cross? Now, okay, let's not go too far ahead of ourselves. You know, you're probably thinking to yourself, Kev, what does that even mean, match cross? Well, this is where another great feature of Scratch comes into play with tooltips. Tooltips are turned on by default, and hovering over anything is going to give you details as to what that tool, function, or option actually does. All right, so let's get back to match cross. So if we turn this parameter on, a shot name must match with the real ID of the event or vice versa, meaning if we turn this option on, basically this name in the name column must match identically with the real ID. Now, to be honest, I'm going to leave that off, and what I'm now going to do is I'm simply going to say assemble. Now, immediately we have a problem. You'll notice that if I come over any one of these clips and I select them and try to play them, they're all offline. So obviously I've done something wrong. So what have I done wrong? Well, let's head back to the construct window. What I want to do is just delete everything I've brought in. So let's come to our timeline, the from media composer.exported timeline. I'm just going to select it to be deleted. I'm going to navigate down and I'm going to say delete. Now, if you don't see that trash can option there, it's because you don't have the edit option turned on right here on the left side of the screen. Okay, so let's head back to import. Let's come back to our AAF. Let's say open. What we're going to do is to select our folder, Media 1. But what we're going to do is we have to tell Scratch to go and find the media by starting to match those clips. Now, as soon as I say go, you'll notice that it seems to have done something, and it was pretty quick. And if I navigate up and I select any one of these clips, you'll see that by selecting the root folder of that hard drive, Scratch has found all of these different clips with the same name. Now, you'll notice actually that this clip down at the bottom is called proxy. This one here is called _source. These were from Adobe Premiere, and that's why they're called source and they're called proxy. Now, those obviously aren't the files I'm going to want to be working with, but this does give you a very cool situation where, let's say, for example, in the offline you were working with a shot that you knew needed visual effects done to it, but now the visual effects are done and you want to swap it out in the conform and the shot has the same name. This is where you can go in, find the correct version of the shot, and swap it out before you even get to the conform process. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're actually just going to clear all of our matches. I'm going to come back. I'm going to set that footage folder to be the specific 4K folder. I'm going to say select. I'm going to start matching, and you'll now see that it's only found one file per file. Okay, I'm now going to come down and say assemble. You'll see in a matter of seconds we're now assembled, and those shots are now in slots ready for us to work with them. Now, what I also want to point out is the fact that if I come to the edit window, you'll see that I can now drag through. But what's going on here? We actually have 2 layers of video. But when I was over in the construct window, I actually only saw 1 layer of clips. So let's head back to the construct window and try to figure out what's going on here. Well, the first thing that's going on is I don't want to be scrolling back and forth through all these slots. So what we're going to do is head on over to the slots section of the construct window, and I'm just going to remove the empty slots. A little bit less scrolling I have to do now. The other thing that I want to point out for you is the fact that this is actually only looking at layer 1. What I want to do now is view layer 2, and there it is. So this is a great way, very visual way to get in and break down your timeline and find only the shots that you need to find. Now, you might be thinking that the slots are fairly high and right now they're fairly empty. Well, don't worry. As the course progresses, we're going to be filling up these slots with other things that I don't want to tease too much here. I just want you to wait and see what we do when we get there. Okay? Now, you do have some other options inside of the construct window, like getting in with some utilities and doing things like generating timecode. But really what we want to do inside of this window is get in and set metadata. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about metadata. We're going to talk about the media browser, but I'm not going to go too in depth in the media browser because I'm going to dedicate an entire lesson to it. But metadata is important to the edit process. Now, before we get there, I want to show you one other option that's actually a way to start setting metadata before we get in and show you the technique that I'm going to show you right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to head down to the lower left-hand corner of the construct window to where we see our shot notes. And I'm just going to come back to layer number 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select this shot right here. And to be honest, it's a little bit blue, and I'd really rather have it look more like a proper daylight shot. So what we're going to do is inside the shot notes, I'm going to type in, make this look more like daylight. Okay? And I'm going to leave the color as red. We can select the color to be whatever we want it to be. And all I'm now going to do is simply add that note to that shot. Okay? Now, once it's on that shot, I'm just going to switch back over to the sources just to get rid of all that metadata info for just 1 second here, is you'll see that what we have the ability to do once we call up the notes directly on the shot is we can change the note, we can change its color, or we can get in and add more pages to the notes. Okay? Now, I did say that this was a way of starting to get in and add metadata to our shots. Let me show you what I mean by that. What we're going to do is navigate over here to the media browser. Now you'll see lots of columns with lots of information, but we're going to skip over all of those for right now and head right to the metadata tab. Now you'll remember I mentioned before about how we'd already been entering metadata and probably didn't even know it by adding notes to our clips. You'll see there is that note that we added to the shot Epics Adventure 09. Now, if you come and take a look down here, you'll see that we have a few columns that we can add. That's going to give us some important information about our shots. But where the power of metadata really comes in is in us creating our own columns to enter our own metadata information. So let's do that right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to create a new column, and we're just going to call this column time of day. I'm going to say add, and as soon as I add it, you'll see it becomes active and the column appears up here in the metadata window. Now, once it's there, to enter metadata for these shots is fairly straightforward. All we need to do is pick one of the shots we want to add the metadata to, and let's pick this shot right here, and I'm just going to call it midday. Now we have to double click so that we get the cursor midday, and I believe there's another shot in here, that one right there, and I'm going to add midday to that one as well. Now I'm going to be honest with you. This is fairly simple and fairly straightforward when you're dealing with, what, 8, 9, 10 shots. But if you're dealing with a feature film, that's a lot of shots that you're going to want to add metadata to very quickly. So how do we go about adding metadata very quickly? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to choose all of the shots that we want to add the metadata to, and we're going to make sure that we have the column selected that we want to have it inputted into. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to navigate down here to the update parameter. Now you'll see that if I drop FX down, we can enter a whole bunch of information, but in this case, it's not relevant to time of day, but I'll show you where it becomes relevant in just a second. What I'm actually going to type in here is doesn't matter, because to be honest, it doesn't really matter what time of day it is. So let's type in doesn't matter, and I'm simply going to say set. Now as soon as I do that, you'll see doesn't matter has now been inputted into all of the time of day input boxes that we had selected. Now, where do all of these other parameters come into play? Well, let me show you. Maybe we want to add a column for frames per second. So let's do that. We're just going to call this FPS. I'm simply going to say add. You'll see FPS has been added. With that column selected, what we're going to do is, again, I'm just going to select everything because we don't want to be, picking certain ones and not picking other ones. And what I'm going to do is come to FX, and we're going to head to frame rate. Once I choose frame rate, you'll see it's now called #FPS. I'm simply going to say set, and that metadata information is going to be added to all of the columns that I have selected. So this is a great way to get in and add metadata, custom metadata, as quickly and as efficiently as you need to add it in there. Now, something else that I want to draw your attention to as well when we were talking about notes is the fact that we also have the ability inside of the media browser to come in and add shot notes to whatever shots we want to have selected here. Or of course, we can choose the shots that already have notes added to them and edit them or add more notes, again, all from within the media browser window. Now, once we've entered all the metadata that we want to enter, what we can do is simply come down and say OK. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that entering all that metadata is great, but what we really want to use that metadata for is tracking shots down as quickly as possible. So how we do that is we're going to navigate to the search option. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can search for notes, and because I know that note is purple, what I'm going to do is deselect all the other colors except purple, and I'm going to say go, and the shot that has the purple note attached to it is what is going to appear inside of our window. Now I'm just going to clear that out because what I also want to show you is the fact that since I've now entered that metadata for midday, if I ever need to track down those shots, all I need to do is come up to find. I'm going to type in midday. Now keep in mind we can get in and adjust the scope of our search, whether it's in the project, the group, the timeline with versions, or just the timeline. And we can also choose whether we want to search everything, exclude the notes from our search, or search just the notes only. Now we're going to search the entire project. We're going to search all the metadata, and all I'm going to do is simply say go, and there's the two shots that we tagged with that midday metadata inside of the media browser. All right, now as always, if you have any questions, you have any comments or ideas for upcoming lessons or courses, I want you to head on over and post them in our forums at lowepost.com/forums. And if you have any questions for me, you can always send them to kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com.